All right, here we are. Let's talk about macronutrients today. Now, let me first preface this by saying that this is a loaded topic. It's a topic that's a little bit tougher to teach and to talk about because there's a lot that goes into it. Also, it's as much scientific as it is art, in my opinion, because there's a lot of science about it, but there's also a number of different factors that are responsible for helping a person determine what a good macronutrient profile would be for their diet. So it's not a super clear cut. It has to be one way or another. So what I'm saying is it's a little trickier to teach, but I'm going to go through and teach you the best I can and to give you a whole lot of understanding and information and help you to construct a good macronutrient profile for your diet. So that's what we're about to do next. But let me also back it up and remind you that I'm not a doctor. This information should not be used to diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure any diseases. With that said, if you're going to change your diet, you should always talk to your physician first. Of course, if you have any allergies or any food sensitivities or anything like that, you need to take those things into consideration. And 100% do not ignore those things. Make sure that you're attentive to those before applying what you've learned here in this discussion today. What we're discussing today is for educational purposes and entertainment purposes only. Of course, not meant to make you eat a certain way. All right, with that said, let's dive into our discussion on nutrition, or should I say macronutrients in regards to nutrition. So I'm gonna open this up here and we are going to go talk about macros. But first, let me remind you that this is not the most important part of your nutrition criteria for getting the body that you want or living a healthy lifestyle. This is the second most important factor, in my opinion. The first is calories. So as a very brief summary, you need to, it all comes down to calories in versus calories out. Do you consume more or do you burn more? Or do you find yourself right in that middle ground, breaking even? That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. That's hands down. You can't fake your way around that, right? However, you can take that set point or that break even point and you can shift it a little bit. Some people have done that in a negative way by accident, maybe well-intentioned, but may have shifted it down in a negative way. In other words, slowed down your metabolism. Other people may have shifted it a little bit in the other direction. But hopefully by this point now, because we've already gone through that, hopefully now you should have a good idea, a good understanding of what your basal metabolic rate is, just the amount to survive and function and live without ailments, issues, and inviting diseases. But then you should also have a good idea of what your weight loss target would be, the amount of calories to be in a caloric deficit and lose weight and see progress. Also your break even, where you are maintaining your same weight, and also what your weight gain or muscle building would be, just anything above break even, right? So hopefully you have a good understanding of those things already. And we elaborated on how you may have altered your own individual needs or your own metabolism in one direction or the other. Most of the time it goes that people slow down their metabolism from chronic over dieting. If that's the case, we've already dissected that. We've already gone through that. And if you have a good understanding, then great, you're in the right spot. If not, go back, figure that stuff out first. Because as I said, that is the most important part, okay? However, today we're talking about macros. Macronutrients. After this, we'll discuss clean eating and why that's important. And then of course, anything else follows that. But really, let's hammer out the second most important part of your nutrition. Also, I kind of consider your meal timing and frequency to be its own discussion that doesn't really fit into what we're I don't think it falls under the category of these topics. So macronutrients. All right, macro versus micro. You've probably heard of micronutrients. You've heard of macronutrients. What they are is everything kind of comes down to all of your foods. They are either going to be a protein, a carb, or a fat, or any combination of those three. There's also alcohol. That's a fourth one, which we'll discuss a little bit more later on in the discussion here today. But generally speaking, it's three macronutrients: proteins, carbs, and fats. Now, micronutrients is going to be all of your vitamins and minerals. You know, your vitamin A, your B vitamins, your vitamin C, D, zinc, selenium, phosphorus, magnesium, all that stuff. That's all micronutrients. That's going to fall a little bit more into the clean eating discussion, because if you're eating a well-rounded diet where you get a good range of those three macronutrients, but also you're eating stuff that's clean, that's from earth, that's not processed junk in a box, then you're going to probably do a pretty good job of, and you're getting a good variety, of course, then you're going to do a pretty good job of fulfilling your micronutrient needs. However, of course, addressing that further is going to be beyond the scope of this discussion and is likely something you could discuss with a dietitian or a nutritionist. However, like I said, we should generally get what we need from eating a good, clean, well-rounded diet. So I'm going to elaborate now on my macronutrients. All right, so they are listed in this order: carb, protein, fat. Why? Because if you go over here, when you talk about macronutrient ratios, which is the percentage of your calories that you consume, they'll be listed out in this order, say 60, 20, 10, or 40, 30, 30. The order is carb, protein, and then fat. And that is, that's pretty much always how they're going to be listed out. So I'll get back to that in a minute and what those ratios are, but let's talk about the purposes of these macronutrients, because like I said, at the end of the day, calories in versus calories out is what's important, and where your body and your individual needs are at this current present time or point in time, that's what matters the most. But with that said, your calories aren't all created equally. So some calories, such as the macronutrient carbohydrates, are going to primarily be your body's favorite source of energy. Your body will choose carbs over fats and proteins as energy every time. And you're not an exception to that. Everyone is that way, everybody. With that said, you are going to want to make sure you don't overconsume carbs, but under-consuming carbs may make it so that you have less energy, right? One thing that stood out to me that I'll never forget probably is in a nutrition class that I had back in college. The thing that the professor continued to harp on was fat is burned in the flame of carbohydrates. So let your carbs be your primary source of energy, and then fat will be burned on the side as a byproduct. There are ways to maybe expedite that process, like keto or something, but we're not going to go into that here and now. And that's maybe a short-term thing, maybe not for everybody, but remember, carbs are energy. All right, your body chooses that for energy every time. Your protein, I will say, is a great macronutrient for tissue repair. So tissue repair, meaning, let's say you break down some muscle fibers from resistance training, because resistance training does that better than cardio would, right? So let's say you do that, you break down that tissue, you do some damage to the muscle, and this is good, because what happens is the adaptation is your body repairs it. Your body repairs that muscle, and what does it use? Uses the building block, protein. Protein is not an energy source. It can be used as an energy source, not very efficiently though, and your body doesn't prefer that. Instead, your body's going to put it to use as tissue repairing. Also, protein is great for speeding up your metabolism. In other words, or the way it does that is there's a hormone that's largely responsible for your appetite and your metabolism called ghrelin. And what happens is one of the amino acids in protein signals to your brain, your body, to secrete ghrelin, and then thus speeding up your metabolism, making you feel more have a higher demand for food. And this is good because that's going to make your body burn more calories. That's going to take that set point that maybe you shifted in a negative direction in the past. And the more protein you eat, the more the more of that amino acid you get, the more you're going to shift that set point or that break-even point back to where it should be. So you're going to signal to your body to speed up its metabolism by eating ample protein. That's why it's so important. But also, of course, to repair your muscle so that you can increase your physical output, or you can get stronger, you can burn more calories, you can burn more energy, and you condition your body to know it can burn through calories rather than storing them as fat for the upcoming famine, right? So does this make sense? So your protein is responsible for hormone production is what I'm saying. That's this next one. But also fat is super important for hormone production, massively. In fact, testosterone is one of those hormones that's a great hormone to have for in higher amounts for burning fat and building muscle and increasing energy, libido, so on and so forth, right? And females and males alike need testosterone. So you'll increase the amount of testosterone you have by doing heavy strength training, but also by making sure you're getting ample amounts of fat in your diet. And that would be largely saturated fat, believe it or not. We want high quality saturated fat, not necessarily the low quality stuff. And what I mean by that is, like, say beef, grass-fed beef is going to be better than conventional beef. But anyways, not going to dive too far down that rabbit hole. What matters most is that you understand that each macronutrient is responsible for different, it has different, they all have different responsibilities in your body. Another thing to know is tissue repair. Fat is also very responsible for that too, because your brain is made up largely of fat. Your nerves are mostly fat. They have a coating or like a jacket that goes around the nerve. If this is your nerve, there's a sheath that goes around it, and that sheath it's all fat. It's a myelin sheath that is fat. So that's important that you have enough fat in your diet to make sure you're repairing any of those tissues as well. But also, all of your food is going to feed your gut bacteria, and your gut bacteria regulates your mood, your energy, your depression or anxiety, so on and so forth. Gut bacteria is very, very important, and having a nice, well-rounded diet, especially one high in fiber, is going to be helpful for regulating that gut bacteria. The list goes on and on, but my point is your macros are all equally important. Absolutely, especially protein being the first and foremost. So we're going to dive into that in a minute, but let me talk about those ratios here. So 60, 20, 10 is a good ratio for an athlete, someone who's really burning a lot of calories, who's busting their butt all the time. That would be a good ratio. High carbs, a reasonable amount of protein, and not cutting fat too low, but having tons of calories, because they're burning tons of calories, right? So that break-even point ends up being pretty darn high for an athlete. Another split or ratio would be a 40-30-30. This is probably the most common, most standard split that I hear about or use or like to start. This is my base point. I like to start here with most people. Being standard, it's a way to get a good balanced diet. You're getting a good amount of all of the macronutrients. It's good for bulking if you're trying to gain muscle. It's also good for repairing your metabolism. But at the same time, you're not going to get like really big and bulky unless you're having a ton of calories on this split. Another split, or should I say ratio, would be, as we go down the list here, we're just decreasing carbs. So this one, 30% of your calories from carbs, 35 from protein, and 35 from fat. This is, I would say, is probably kind of middle ground, maybe a little bit of a lean bulk, in that it's going to be less likely that you'll gain any fat if you're trying to bulk up and build muscle. But also, without as many carbs, you're going to have a harder time building muscle. So it'll be a slower muscle building process, but simultaneously, you'll gain less fat. So anyways, that's just another idea, just another range. As you go down the list here, 20, 40, 40, this is a low carb diet, pretty high in protein, pretty high in, reasonably high in fat, but to hit 40% of your calories from protein generally is going to mean that your calories in total are going to be pretty low, because it's going to be very challenging to get a high amount of calories and 40% of your calories from protein. That's really tough. So essentially this one would naturally be, of course, low carb, but also naturally low calorie. And then as you look down here, we've got 10% of your calories from carbs, 10 or less, and then 35% of your calories from protein, and then 55% or greater from fat. This would fall into what's called the very low carb diet. Usually, well, people would refer to this as keto, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is keto. This just means it can be keto if you do the other things properly, which again, that's another topic for another discussion. We won't go there, but it could be a keto diet potentially, yeah. So my point with pointing out these ratios is that you would choose a ratio that is most applicable to what you're trying to achieve. Generally speaking, people are going to fall somewhere in here in a program like this, where you're trying to speed up your metabolism and lose fat, right? That's what pretty much everyone wants to do. So if you're looking to gain muscle, lose fat, or speed up that metabolism, then we're going to be looking at one of these splits roughly. Let's go ahead and check out this next page. So we want to talk about macros and calories, and then we'll talk about what to do with your macros next. So first of all, carbs. Carbs, being that first macro, contain 4 calories per gram. So every gram of carb has 4 calories. Same thing with protein, 4 calories per gram, but fat is a little bit different. Fat has actually 9 calories per gram. That's why when we go back here, you see it being the last number is usually the smaller number, because it has so many more calories than the other macronutrients. Okay, so let me move back here. Also, alcohol, being that other macronutrient we're talking about, that does also contain 7 calories per gram. So when you are tracking, though, when you're tracking alcohol in your MyFitnessPal or any calorie tracker, you're going to want to do the math however you need to, whether it's on paper, whether it's in your noggin, whether it's whatever, somewhere on the side, or add it in there manually into your app if you can, if you know how to do that. Adding in alcohol as either a carb or a fat, because most all macronutrient calculators or trackers are going to only count proteins, fats, and carbs. And so alcohol, though, is calories. It is something. It's absolutely not going to count as protein. Okay, it doesn't do anything that protein does, but it is going to, it won't matter if you count it as fat or as carbs. It really doesn't. So just pick one, pick the other, pick a combination of them, doesn't even matter. Because what percentage of carbs and fats you end up going with is not very important anyways. So to elaborate on that, let's head to the next portion over here, which is your protein requirements. Because I'm going to be honest with you, at the end of the day, behind calories, the only next important thing in terms of your macronutrients, as far as macros go, is your protein intake. Like I said, you do need to have fats in your diet, because that's absolutely essential. You can survive without carbs, but not fats or protein. So you aren't going to have too few fats in your diet, most likely, unless you're like avidly avoiding fats. Okay, you're probably going to have fats in your diet. With that said, let's focus on getting enough protein, because that's the hard one. Literally, that is tough. So let me first tell you, what does the FDA recommend The absolute minimum amount of protein required in order to maintain a positive nitrogen balance in your body, which is 0.36 grams per pound of body weight. That's like nothing. That's very low. And most people, most Americans are hovering right around this amount, maybe even below. So as a point of reference, let's put this into real world perspective. If you're a small female, just 135 pounds, that ends up equaling, you take 135 times 0.36, here's what you get. 48 grams of protein per day is what's minimum required, just to stave off disease, illness, metabolic problems, and autoimmune issues, right? Like hypothyroidism and stuff like that. Just 48 grams. Do you want to know what that is? An egg is only 6 grams of protein. If you have 2 eggs at breakfast, that's 12 grams. So you got to do that 4 more times throughout the day in order to meet that minimum. So reconsider if you're trying to moderate your protein intake, or if you're maybe now having an aha moment where you're realizing, oh crap, I actually might not be putting a ton of protein in. If you're not sure, well, let me take it a little bit further. A burger patty is generally going to be probably 20 grams, roughly 20 grams. Are you eating 2.5 burger patties per day in order to hit this absolute bare minimum? Probably not. A steak could be 48 grams if it's a big one. But I think a lot of times people are minimizing steak, minimizing chicken, which is probably like a big chicken breast is going to be between 25 and 35 grams per day. And sometimes that's the only protein a lot of people get. So ask yourself, take a real good, honest look at your protein intake. Are you down around here and struggling? Well, then that might be why. Okay. So instead, what do we want to do? Instead, we want to aim for 0.75 to 1.25 grams per pound of body weight. Okay, this is just a range and there's no perfect amount, but I'm going to tell you how to differentiate and figure out where you should land in there. 0.75, let's say you're you have a lot of extra body fat, like you might fall into that obese category. If that's the case, use 0.75 times your body weight. And that'll give you a good amount of protein that you should be consuming per day. However, if you're a little bit more on the leaner side, like you don't have very much fat to eliminate or to get rid of, then maybe you could go as high as 1.25 grams per pound of body weight. So why don't we go ahead, we'll do the math here again, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. Let's say you're that, again, rather smaller female, 135 pounds. That's going to land you somewhere between 100 grams per day and 167 grams per day. So you really got to work at it. That's 25 grams of protein 4 times. That you have to try, because the standard American diet doesn't typically look like that. It's most often that we're higher in carbs, lower in fat, higher in carbs and fats and lower in protein. So we actually have to flip the script and reverse that macronutrient profile. So really be focusing on getting the protein in so you get enough of those amino acids so that you speed up your metabolism, so that you start to be able to condition your body to lose fat, to burn your calories and lose the fat. Take that set point that you created, maybe damaged before, improve it. So we do that with eating more protein. Now, I know there are other calculations, other ways to figure out your protein requirements, such as a factor determining your lean. You do a body fat analysis and determine what your lean body mass is, and you take that number times another number. That's fine, that's great, but I'm going to assume you don't have those tools at your disposal, and we're going to use this calculation. And because it's also not like that critical, unless you're like looking to actually get on a physique stage, like trying to do a bodybuilding show or a bikini show or one of those kind of things. In that case, then you might dial it in a little bit more, but really at the end of the day, we just need to be in the ballpark. Okay. We just need to be in the right range here. and not chronically under consuming protein. So let's get it up there. All right. That's the main thing. So do the math with these numbers, these equations, that'll get the job done for you. And then what does that look like? So I mentioned that this female here is going to have to eat about 25 to 30 grams of protein or even more, about 4 times per day. What does that end up equating to? It usually equates to about 1 palm or ballpark 4 or 5 ounces 4 times per day. So you take your palm, look at it like that. That's generally going to be about, call that 25 to 30 grams of a protein source, as long as it's a mostly protein food. And we'll get into that in a minute too. Now, men, you're going to want to have about 1.5 times that. That usually equals your hand is a little bit bigger. That's going to kind of accommodate for that, but also our hormones are set up in a way and we metabolize food a little bit more and burn a few more calories. So you're going to actually go about probably 1.5 times that. So 1.5 palms. So for men, we're probably 1 palm is going to be about 5 or 6 ounces, and then tack on another half. You're looking at about 7, call it 8 to 10 ounces of protein at a serving. Err on the side of caution if you must and go with 8. Okay, that's fine. Do that 4 times per day and we're succeeding. So hopefully you're with me still. The main point here is that protein is so important for your metabolism, for the progress that you're looking to achieve. Now, what we want to talk about is your, I want to give you a real life example of what this looks like. Let's say, again, we take that female who's weighing in at 135 pounds. That's what this is, body weight, 135. So how do we figure out her protein requirements? Well, we're going to go smack in the middle of that 0.75 and 1.25. We're just going to go with 1 gram per pound. Makes it nice, easy math. Makes it so you don't have to, choose one end of the spectrum or the other. So that equals 135 grams of protein per day. Now, earlier we had that slide just a few minutes ago that said 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. All right, so now I'm going to tell you how many calories you need. 135 grams of protein times 4 gives you 540 calories of protein per day. Okay, 540 calories of protein per day. So what I also did was I figured, all right, this lady's going to need about 1,750 calories. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I believe you've gone through this already. If you haven't, you better go back and do this. I'm telling you. All right. So female, 135. Let's say she's about 5'4". Let's say the age is 32 and basal metabolic rate. Here's her number. About 1,400 is the minimum amount of calories she should be consuming. Now, activity factor. Let's say we go down here and she's lightly active or sedentary, or let's say she's moderately active. Even on the higher end, let's say she's very active. That's how to figure this out. But I'm going to use moderately active just for the sake of being conservative here, because you are exercising consistently in this program. So that's going to be a 1.55 activity factor. That's where I selected this one from. So what's the break even? Theoretically, if the metabolism hasn't been slowed down too much, we're at about 2,150 calories. We'll break even and make this girl maintain her weight. But what we're trying to do is lose fat, generally speaking, in this program. So that's going to be somewhere between 1,600 and 1,900 calories. So what I did was, for the sake of this, let's pull back up that whiteboard. For the sake of this program, I made that super simple and went with 1,750. Subtract the 540 that she already is eating in protein. There's 1,210 calories remaining. So I want you to do this for yourself too, right? Because first and foremost, to figure out your macronutrients, you need to go with figure out what your protein requirements are. And then second, fill in the rest. So with 1,210 calories left, we're going to say, I like to go with carb split of roughly 40% of your calories from carbs. So if we do the math, we end up with 700 calories is 40%. Divided by 4 grams per, or 4 calories per gram, gives us 175 grams carbs per day. So simple math, right? Take your overall calories, and then let me highlight that so you see it. Take your overall calories that you're consuming each day, times it by 0.4, if we're looking for that 40-30-30 split, then divide it by 4 calories per gram, and bam, you've got your grams. So she needs 175 grams per day. All right, so then you got to say, well, what's left? Well, we've got our 1,750 calories minus 540 protein minus 700 carbs. We've got 510 calories left. So what we're going to do is take that 510 calories, divide it by 9, because we're working with fat, and we get about 57 grams. There you go. So as we then do the math on that, this is what that looks like. 40, 30, 30. 175 grams of carbs, 135 grams of protein, 57 grams fat. That's a really nice macronutrient split. Does it have to be exactly that? No. But what's most important is that this protein category gets to be where it needs to be first, and the rest is split between carbs and fats. What can play a role in how you split those? It's going to be this. One, what do you enjoy? Okay. I like both fats and carbs. Some people are just like, I really don't like anything that's fat. I just love my carbs. Okay, be my guest. Go for it. Go a little higher in that category. Or if you're on the opposite side, you're like, no, I really try to go low carb. Well, great. Then go a little higher in the protein or in the fats. That's fine. So your personal preference plays a role here. That's why I consider this a little bit of an art. But also, we want to consider your body type. If you are someone who, let's do a little test here. I'm going to close this. All right. Take your wrist, take your pointer finger and your thumb, wrap it around. Okay. So this is a test to determine your body type. If you touch just like you just meet, just like mine does right here, that means you're a mesomorph. That's in the middle. If your fingers overlap like so, then that means you're going to be an ectomorph. You're on the lankier, skinnier, longer side, and you can go higher carbs. Okay. If you're on the other end of that, where you're, say, you have a gap here and your finger does not touch your thumb, you're an endomorph. It means you're going to have a little thicker frame, just going to naturally be a little bit stockier. You're going to do better with a lower carb diet. So choose those based on personal preference and also your body type. Lower carbs for an endomorph, higher carbs will be just fine if you're an ectomorph. So let's do a quick little fast summary, recap. Macros is important, but not as important as calories. Macros are not micronutrients, but eating clean and eating a well-rounded balanced diet, you're going to end up doing well with your micronutrients. But most importantly, let's talk about these macros right now. Micronutrients will come in later. Macros, we know they each provide different purposes, so it's important that we do get a good, well-rounded amount of those, and using the ranges that we've already discussed. Also, we talked about how many calories are in each macronutrient, talked about all the different ratios and what they could each be good for, and why protein is so important and why it's number one, and the rest you kind of figure out and balance out the fats and the carbs based on your own personal preference and body type. But also we talked about those serving sizes. Protein is going to be most important there. Using the palm of your hand is a good indicator. And also men, you're going to 1.5 to 2 times those serving sizes. And then we got one more thing to talk about. I'm going to show you here, which is food list. So what foods are what? So carbs, there are tons of different carbs, but I've listed out here the what I would consider to be the highest quality carb foods. Things that are not processed, that are clean, that are more natural, closer to earth, are going to work better and give you better micronutrients. But also, you're going to have better time filling up with these, getting more fiber with these, and also not signaling as much to your body to produce insulin, thus storing fat, and long-term inviting type 2 diabetes, right? So we're steering away from those things, and we're steering towards health and nutrition. So that's going to be sweet potatoes, red potatoes. Sure, white potatoes are natural and from earth as well, but white potatoes are a little bit more sugary, have a little bit more of an insulin and fat storage response. Not a big deal, but if we're really trying to be careful, stick to these. White rice, brown rice, all good. Brown rice is going to do the same sort of thing as these potatoes compared to white rice. Okay. Oatmeal, great option. Beans, lentils, quinoa, squash, fruit, not dried fruit, but whole fruit in moderation. When you're trying to lose fat, we don't want to have too much fruit because it's high in fructose, which is a sugar. It's a fat storage sugar, but a little bit of that is okay, just not going overboard. Good way to play it safe and get a highly nutritious version of fruit, if you will, would be berries, because they're not going to be super sugary. And then plain popcorn and rice cakes should not be underestimated. Those are a great source too. Okay, here's the ones to watch out for. Generally avoid. I'm not saying to always avoid, because I'm a fan of anything in moderation. Just making sure that we're not overdoing it with these ones. These are the other versions of carbs you could consume, but let's try to, keep those at bay. Fats, as I mentioned before, how important they are. Here are the good quality ones. They're all listed out for you. I highly, highly encourage some avocado. Definitely, as you go down the list, sometimes people are going to be sensitive to things like dairy and nuts. That's fine. Just avoid those if that's the case. Otherwise, dairy and nuts are going to usually fall into the fat category. Sometimes people like to misconstrue those as proteins. They do have protein, but they're definitely higher in fat. Nut butter, seeds, pork most pork is going to be higher in fat. Same with most beef. The yolk is where the fat is found in eggs. Of course, you've got salmon, fish oil, chia seeds, so on and so forth. Flax seeds. Chias are great because they're higher in omega-3s, whereas flax seeds are even profile of omega-3 to omega-6. So both very good, but chia, super, super great, just like avocado and salmon. Raw oysters pack about as much punch for nutrition as anything, high in protein, high in fat, good fat. Of course, the list goes on, and I'm not going to read everything to you because you've got eyes, you can read those things too. But be careful, we're not having too many fried foods, vegetable oils, too many of those salad dressings, conventional butter. Grass-fed would be the way to go there. Fatty meats, and so on. Now, lastly, protein. Egg whites are going to be primarily protein, and the yolks are going to contain some protein, but also containing the fat. Egg whites, no fat, so you can just really hit those hard. Chicken breast, turkey jerky, of course, lean ground beef, bison, elk, venison. These are all good high protein sources that are also lean. They're not going to have very much fat, so that'll help you to lower that fat and carb ratio that we talked about earlier and bring up that protein a little bit. Of course, yogurts, make sure we're not getting the sugary stuff. Go with Greek, go with Bulgarian, go with Siggi's, go with Oikos 000. These are good sources for you. Cottage cheese, low fat, just to make up for any extra fat you might be getting in your diet elsewhere. Frozen shrimp as opposed to battered shrimp, because that would be fried and it would also contain extra carbs. Instead, take your shrimp, dip it in a little cocktail sauce, and we're winning. Lobster, of course, all these seafoods. Oysters, as mentioned before, keep your pork a little bit leaner. Same with your steaks, keep them leaner if you can. And then protein shakes. All right, protein shakes are a supplement. Supplements are meant to supplement your diet, not be your diet. Let's make sure we are supplementing with protein to close the gaps, to bridge the gap between large distances or large gaps between meals, or if you're just struggling to get in enough protein throughout the day, okay, let that help you out. But it's a supplement. It's 5% of your diet, not 95% of your diet, not 50%. 5% of your nutrition should come from supplements at most. Okay. Powdered peanut butter is just a leaner version of peanut butter. It doesn't have as much carb and fat. Of course, collagen, bone broth, other options. And then be careful with soy and tofu. If you're a vegetarian or a vegan, of course, this is going to be one of your highest sources of protein, but I encourage you to keep that in moderation, because the amount of estrogen it will increase, which can offset the balance of estrogen to testosterone that we want. So we want to make sure we aren't overdoing soy to prevent influencing that as well. And I believe there's don't quote me on this, but I believe there's a link to hypothyroidism or thyroid conditions with soy. So look out for that. Cheese and sour cream do contain protein, definitely fat as well. So make sure that you're considering those in the fat category if you're consuming those also. Okay, we've gone through a lot, and I'm proud that you are still with me. If you're still with me at this point now, let's just make sure you remember that you take those lists of foods, pick the ones you enjoy, because those are going to be the ones that you will stick to. All right, that's what's most important. In order to have long-lasting, sustainable progress, you can stick with it. And the way you do that is you enjoy it, and it's not a pain in the butt for you. So choose those foods wisely, trying to find the proper ratios. And again, it's ballpark, but number one is get that protein in line. All right, that's all I've got for you. It was a strong lesson today, lots to it, but now time to go out and execute. Let's do it.